Hello everyone, my name is Abhishek and welcome back to my channel. So many aspiring DevOps engineers are worried about Python because Python is an ocean. There are so many packages, libraries and modules in Python. So a lot of times people feel Python is overwhelming and they find it difficult to focus on learning Python. In today's video, I'm going to make it very simple for you. So if you are a DevOps or cloud aspirant, these are 8 Python packages, libraries, or modules that you need to know. By knowing these 8 Python libraries, modules, or packages, you can definitely be at a better place while giving the interviews. So make sure you watch this video till the end. First of all, whenever you're working as a DevOps engineer, mostly you deal with cloud platform, you deal with creating infra on the cloud platforms. If you're dealing with AWS, the Python library, which is very popularly used, is Boto3. So this is for AWS. Let's say you are in Azure ecosystem. There is something called Azure SDK. Now using Boto3, which is very widely used in the world of AWS, you can create infrastructure on AWS. So that's why you need to know this package. All that you need to do is to install Boto3, then import Boto3 and use the specific Boto3 client. Let's say you want to go for EC2. Maybe you want to use Python to create EC2 instance on AWS. Then you can use Boto3 client for EC2 and you can describe the instances, create the instances, everything that you can do with AWS CLI or through AWS APIs. In fact, Boto3 under the hood actually uses AWS APIs. As I told you, just like Boto3 for Azure, you have something called Azure SDK. Now, the second package that you need to know as a DevOps engineer is Paramiko. So Paramiko is a Python module that is used to SSH or that is used to connect to a remote virtual machine using SSH. Very simple. Let's say there is a virtual machine and you want to connect to this virtual machine and maybe install a package on this virtual machine. Or maybe you are given a task to connect to a virtual machine and get the status of the virtual machine. While using Python, to do this, you will use a Python package called Paramiko. It's very simple to use Paramiko. Again, just install Paramiko. Then you need to import Paramiko, use the Paramiko SSH client, and then you just need to connect using the host IP address or DNS, username, and the password. But Abhishek, how can I keep the username and password secure? You can use variable instead of hard coding these values. You can use input variable in Python, or you can use the input in Python where you can take details from the end user. Or also you can go for OS variables. And finally, you just need to use SSH exec command to run any command that you are interested. Let's say you want to run ls or you want to run mkdir or maybe you want to run a complex shell script. You can do that using ssh.exec command. But especially when you're using Paramiko, you deal with commands, not with scripts. Then the third package that you should know as a DevOps engineer, especially you can talk about this as part of your day-to-day activities, is Docker SDK for Python. You might have a question here, but Abhishek, do I need to remember everything? Actually not. For example, if you just search for Docker SDK for Python, you have a very clear documentation. Even if I'm writing a Python script, I wouldn't remember everything. Let's say I want to understand how to pull a Docker image from Docker Hub or a container image from Docker Hub. I'll just head to the images section in the documentation. I will look for the command or I will look for the script that needs to be used. For example, this is all that you need to write in the Python script. Clients.images.pull followed by the name of the image, and if you want to pull a specific tag or you want to pull all the tags. Of course, you have a detailed syntax on how to use this package even before using a particular line to pull the image. This is how you initialize. First, you install the Docker package, then you use the import command to import the Docker SDK, and then you initialize it using docker.from-env. In the GitHub documentation, I have provided detailed steps. You'll also find the GitHub link in the description. For example, import Docker, client is equals to docker.from-env. This is something that you write in every Python script whenever you are dealing with Docker SDK, followed by the line that is very specific to your script. For example, clients.containers.run, which container you want to run. Let's say you want to pull an image. I already showed you. So you can use client.docker.pull followed by the image and also a specific tag. It's that simple. Then Kubernetes SDK for Python. Now that I've explained about Docker SDK, I don't think I have to explain about Kubernetes library for Python. It's very simple. Just like Docker, using this, you can basically create pods on Kubernetes cluster. Maybe you can delete a pod from the Kubernetes cluster or run a service. Again, everything that you can do using Kubernetes APIs. Because end of the day, the Python library is also going to use Kubernetes APIs. These three lines are going to be common in every Python script that you write for Kubernetes. And these lines are going to be very specific to your Kubernetes implementation using Python. Now, again, you don't have to remember any of these things. In fact, nobody would remember it. Everyone will just head to the documentation, just like how I went to Docker SDK for Python. Similarly, you will search for Kubernetes package for Python, and you will get a detailed syntax for it. Now, moving aside, like we discussed about Docker, we discussed about Kubernetes, but one of the classic usage of Python when it comes to DevOps and cloud engineers is usage of PyYAML. What is PyYAML? As DevOps engineer, you deal with YAML files every day. Imagine if you want to script on the YAML file. Maybe you want to update the YAML files, or maybe you want to read the YAML files. How will you do it? Because YAML is not a text file. It comes with a proper indentation. It comes with proper syntaxing. So there is something called PyYAML, and using PyYAML, you can actually traverse or you can go through fields in the YAML file. Maybe let's say a task is to extract a value when a key is provided in the YAML. You can do it by reading YAML as a text file, but it becomes super complicated. Whereas if you use PyYAML, your life is going to be very simple. For example, this is how you do it. So you import the YAML. Once you install it, then you open YAML file and using YAML.safe load. So basically, you are reading the YAML file using PyYAML. The next one is request module in Python. This is exactly like curl in shell scripting. If you know what can curl do when you are using shell scripting, exactly you can use requests in Python. For example, you want to make a HTTP request in Python. Then the module that you're going to use is the request module. So just like the HTTP protocol, request also supports request.get, request.put, request.delete, and also request.get, put, delete, and create, right? So you have request.get. For example, you want to go through a specific website and you want to read the JSON value of it. Then the next one is Fabric. Fabric, you can just consider it as an advanced version of Paramiko, because Fabric is a Python module that is written as a wrapper on top of Paramiko. But Abhishek, when you have Paramiko, what is the reason for going with Fabric? Paramiko is used for simple tasks. As I told you, let's say you have Python running on your Windows machine and you want to connect to a virtual machine using SSH as a protocol and you want to execute a command on the virtual machine. This is a classic use case for Paramiko. However, instead of a single command, let's say you want to connect to multiple virtual machines and on each virtual machine, you want to run multiple commands. This is where Fabric comes into picture. Because in Fabric, using Fabric module, as a DevOps engineer, you can write a fab file. Within the fab file, you can define the task that needs to be executed. And using Fabric, you can connect to multiple virtual machines or you can connect through SSH and run the task provided in the fab file. Of course, I'm not going into details of how to use Fabric because I just want to keep it simple in this video and explain you what are the 8 Python packages, libraries and modules that you need to learn as a DevOps engineer. If required, I will do a dedicated video explaining how to use each of these modules. The final one is PyTest. Lot of times in interviews, interviewers ask this question. Okay, so you're writing Python script. So you're writing Python script to deal with Docker, or you're writing Python script to deal with Kubernetes, or maybe you're using request module in Python. But how do you test your Python script? If you are a developer, if you're writing source code for your application, you write unit tests to test your code at the very first place. So the answer to this question, as a DevOps engineer, when you write the scripts, you can also implement unit tests for your scripts. And the popular package for implementing unit tests in Python is PyTest. Of course, PyTest to an extent can also be used for functional or regression testing, but very popularly it is used for unit testing. So whenever interviewers ask you, have you unit tested your script or do you usually write unit tests for your scripts? You can say yes. And the package that you use is PyTest. PyTest is very popularly used when you are writing some Python automation or when you are writing Python script as part of your Ansible roles. There you can use PyTest to unit test your code. So these are the 8 packages that you should definitely know. Just a quick revision. Photo 3 or Azure SDK for dealing with AWS or Azure automation. Paramiko for SSH remote execution. Docker for container management, especially if you're using Docker API. Kubernetes for Kubernetes API access. PyYAML for handling the YAMLs. Requests for any sort of API communication. Fabric for CLI automation, that is for running multiple tasks as part of your Python execution on a remote SSH server. PyTest for testing your scripts. Now you might have a question, but Abhishek, I can also use shell script. Why should I go for Python? Because majority of these cases can be implemented using shell script as well. You just need to understand a very simple thing here. Shell script is only for your Linux machines. A lot of times, DevOps engineers might be using a Windows machine, or DevOps engineers might be dealing with a Windows server, or also DevOps engineers might be using Mac as a machine. In these cases, there are less chances that your shell script might work. So dealing with Python is better option in such cases. Otherwise, you can just go with shell scripting. If shell is possible, go with it. If shell is not possible, and if your automation is complicated, go with Python. I hope you found this video interesting. See you all in the next video. Like every time, I try to explain things crisp and also try to make it detailed.